Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. I'm here with a replay of round 2 of a Modern League. We won round 1 against Sultai Ninjas, a super sweet deck that I hope is able to sort of get tuned a bit and actually find a home in Modern. I won the die roll again, and this is a keep. It's a little bit sketchy because our only land is a pain land, but I'm not going to ship turn 1 AEther Vial with a bunch of creatures and counterspell to stop any broken stuff that the opponent might do on turn 1. So we go down to 19 and play an AEther Vial. I believe in round 1 we didn't see any Waterlogged Grove, so this is its first appearance in a league match on my channel. We saw Force of Negation in both games in round 1. Opponent's going to open with what? Faithless Looting. That's going to get Force of Negated. I'm going to pitch one of these Lords. I'm sorry, I pitch Trickster because the Lords just are going to allow me just to beat the opponent down as quickly as possible. It looks like it's maybe Dredge. So take AEther Vial up. Another Lord. I guess we play out our second AEther Vial. We are going to get these creatures on the table pretty quickly. Insolent Neonate. So I guess, again, Dredge, it could be any number of Vengevine strategies. They sack it, put a Vengevine into the graveyard. A little bit worrying because they already cast the Neonate. They could have another creature to cast this turn, but they didn't. So they just passed, which was a bit of dodging a bullet there. So tick both AEther Vials up. Drew a Relic. They're pretty solid. Main deck Relic against Graveyard strategy in game 1. Loving it. Opponent got rid of their fetch land, and they're going to crack another fetch land for an Overgrown Tomb. All right, we've already been hitting our own life totals here. Opponent goes for Bloodghast. Not the most threatening thing. And just a Blackleaf Cliffs with no action. So on their end step, we will put in one of these Lords. And yeah, I'm going to leave both of these on 2. Actually, you know what? So we are... the one that's on 2, we activate now so that we can do the 2 to 4 skip trick because Master of Waves would be a huge house right now. So again, just taking Relic down, and the fact that I got to untap with Relic is pretty amazing since now I have land up to just crack it if they try to do anything, like get that Vengevine into play. Let's get this Lord out right now and just hit for 4. The opponents go down to 12, and I've got lethal on board. So here's an Altar of Dementia. This is some variation of the new Hogaak Vine deck, otherwise affectionately known as Hogvine. So they sack the Bloodghast. And basically what Altar of Dementia does, this is a card that was, it's a legacy reprint into Modern with Modern Horizons. So both of these matchups, extremely Modern Horizons dependent in this league. So sack a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power, in this case 2, because Bloodghast is 2 power, into their graveyard from the top of their library. So what they want to do is fill up their graveyard until they get a Hogaak, and then they can get that guy on the board, sack him to Altar of Dementia. That gets 8 more things. They can delve to cast Hogaak again and again, keep sacking him. Once they've gotten to a point where they've got enough to just recast Hogaak. They're going to have bridges from below that are making zombies, which will help cast Hogaak with Convoke. At a certain point, they're going to start milling me out. So being able to keep their graveyard in check here is a huge game. So they play this Bloodstained Mire, and in response to the Bloodghast trigger, I'm going to go ahead and crack this. So they crack the Bloodstained Mire in response, which gives them another trigger, another land drop trigger to get the Bloodghast back. But I'm just not taking any chances. They can have one Bloodghast. I'm going to get rid of that Vengevine. Going to get rid of all of their fuel to be able to potentially delve for a Hogaak. So they sacked the Bloodghast, and with only 3 cards in hand, they couldn't get anything going with this limited graveyard. And main deck Relic of Progenitus doing a great job. Waterlogged Grove did 4 damage to me, but it just let me kind of go off with my AEther Vials. So yeah, pretty great game 1. Let's go to game 2. All right, I'm back for game 2 after dominating Hogvine in game 1. Let's have a look at the opening hand. This is picture perfect. I can show you guys the sideboard plan for this matchup. I took out 4 Benthic Biomancers. Ben tends to be at his worst in matchups where we have to spend our mana all the time. Like if we're not going to be able to spend 2 mana to get an adapt paid for, then Ben is just a Merfolk of the Pearl Trident and really not worth the spot. I took out a Master of Waves on the draw because he's pretty slow. I took out both Thassas, again, because the matchup is just super fast. Echoing Truth could come in this matchup, but since they have a lot of sack outlets, if you try to target like one zombie, they can just sacrifice it to Altar of Dementia or to Carrion Feeder. So Echoing Truth stayed in the sideboard. Obviously, all of our creatures are pretty good since that's how we're going to win. Looks like I kept all the Spreading Seas in since they are a 3-color non-blue deck. Spreading Seas can do work. So if I took out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards that... no, I actually took out 8 since I took out an island on the draw. Something that I do pretty often. The math supports trimming a land on the draw. So with 8 cards coming out, that would mean that I brought in my other 2 relics. I brought in 2 Grafdigger's cages. And then what else would I have brought in? Let me think for a second. I guess the 4 Revokers. So that's 8 cards. So 4 more creatures in the form of Revokers. Offsetting, taking out some of my Merfolk, and then 4 more pieces of Graveyard Hate, replacing 2 Thassas, a land, and I guess a Master of Waves. So significantly stronger with 4 more pieces of Graveyard Hate after sideboarding, and the Revokers can hit any of their sacrifice outlets or... well, no, that's it. Basically, the creature sack outlets or the Altar of Dementia. So a really great opening hand for me. We're going to get to see Waterlogged Grove again. Opponent kept 7, and I kept 7. So with them on the play, let's see what they start with. A Gravecrawler, not as frightening as, say, the Faithless Looting, and were I to have Force of Negation in hand, wouldn't have been able to stop the Gravecrawler anyway, so pretty reasonable threat for us to be able to handle. Gravecrawler here, and go ahead and put out Relic on turn 1. Opponent just keeps playing creatures. This is an approach that we can definitely handle. If they just keep playing 2/1s, we're going to outpace their strategy pretty easily. Top decking into another Relic is a pretty easy choice. I'm just going to play that and leave up 1 so that I can keep their graveyard empty. So Overgrown Tomb comes in untapped, puts them down to 17, and we see an Altar of Dementia. They start to sacrifice these creatures. If we feel threatened, we can sacrifice one of the Relic of Progenitus. But it looks like they're just cracking in first with the 2 guys. I'm going to go down to 14. And we see an Insolent Neonate. All right, so not trying to go off this turn means I get to untap with both of these relics. Definitely not going to cycle one even with mana up because you want to have as much Graveyard Hate on the board as possible against a deck like this. I'm going to go ahead and pass the turn here. Wow, the opponent sacrifice Insolent Neonate, discarding a Bridge from Below. So with the Bridge from Below trigger on the stack, I can activate one of these relics, force them to get rid of one of their cards. In response to that trigger, or activation, I should say, they sacrificed a Bloodghast, getting another Bridge from Below trigger, in response to which I activate the other relic. So they got rid of the Insolent Neonate. And at this point, the play, I believe, is just to sacrifice one of these relics, which means that the bridge will go away and they won't get any zombies. Now, in response to this, they could have sacrificed the Gravecrawler to put another bridge trigger on top, but they didn't. The bridge goes away, and then the bridge triggers do nothing. So these relics doing an excellent job. As their altar triggers resolve, I see a Carrion Feeder and a Lightning Axe went to the graveyard. In response to the first relic trigger, they had to get rid of one of their cards, so Lightning Axe is gone. The first bridge trigger did nothing, and now Neonate's going to let them draw a card. Opponent only has 3 cards in hand. I think I'm just going to flash in Trickster here now. One might disagree with that, saying that they could potentially go off, and why would I, take the relic offline by using my mana? But honestly, in this spot here, I didn't feel super threatened. I mean, what lines could they take? They could have another card to fill the graveyard, like a Faithless Looting or something, and potentially generate a few zombies. In which case, I might have felt silly about tapping out, but we need to start doing damage, and I'm not just going to leave my mana up all game. So they did sack the Gravecrawler in the end, and they Assassin's Trophied the Relic, which is just fine because mana is going to give us things to do. And I drew into another Grafdigger's Cage, and I should mention I also have the Phyrexian Revoker to name Altar here. So easy choice to play the Grafdigger's Cage, Phyrexian Revoker named Altar, and then I'll go ahead and play Spreading Seas on the red mana so that they don't have access to Faithless Looting. We've got a handful of Merfolk, a bunch of hate on the board, Merfolk Trickster cracking in for 2. It doesn't seem like the opponent's going to have much to do, and indeed, looks like they just passed back to me. So play a Lord, activate Mutavault, swing for 8. It's a 2-turn clock. Opponent has no answer, and they just scoop. So for those of you who are really worried about this new Hogvine deck, I would encourage you to not be worried. As Merfolk pilots, we have Force of Negation, which we saw in Game 1 against this deck, and got access to Relic. I've even got them in my main deck right now. I've got access to Grafdigger's Cage. Phyrexian Revoker naming their sacrifice outlets. So a lot of angles from which to attack this deck strategy. And I've only seen it twice so far, but I've beaten it pretty easily both times. On the end step there, I probably could have cycled the Waterlogged Grove if I wanted to. We already have lethal on board, so I guess cycling the Waterlogged Grove could potentially draw us into another force, which we could hold up mana for during our attacks, even after activating Mutavault. So even though we didn't do it, Waterlogged Grove could have been another card in that game. As it turned out, I didn't even need it. So 2-0 in this league currently, having beaten Sultai Ninjas and Hogaak Vine here. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Of course, please leave your thoughts down below on the matchup, on the gameplay of this particular match. And please take a second and check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support the channel. And tune in for the next video where I'll be back with round 3 of this Modern League. I'll see you guys there. Bye.